Now let's take a look at the organization of mine workers, because a lot of Mexican Americans were involved in the mining industry during this time throughout the Southwest. What were conditions like for the miners? Well, for example, a lot of mine workers had to do a lot of extra labor that wasn't even related to what they were being paid for. So, for example, coal mine workers, they were paid for how much coal they were able to load up within the mines, but they had to do a lot of extra labor, such as building railways into the mines to transport the coal, and they were not paid for that extra labor. They also had to work in dangerous working conditions. There wasn't a lot of good air in the mines, and there could be fires. There was an explosion that took place at the Phelps Dodge Corporation mine in 1913. And so it's very dangerous work, and you're not getting paid for it, and you're doing a lot of extra labor. Your wages are pretty low. And sometimes your wages would be cut, and you also had to experience periods of unemployment when you'd be laid off for a couple of months. And so conditions were not very good for mine workers, so obviously they're going to want to organize and fight for better working conditions and better pay. This would lead to the Ludlow Massacre in Colorado, as mine workers were fighting for the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company to recognize their union. Right? So one thing is, when you're creating a union and this union is going to be fighting for your rights, the company has to recognize that the union actually represents the workers officially. Okay? And so mine workers there were trying to fight for this Colorado Fuel and Iron Company to recognize their union, which was the United Mine Workers of America. So the mine workers were protesting, and eventually guards who worked for the company, as well as the Colorado National Guard, came out to stop the strike. They ended up firing weapons into the miners' camp, because at this time, a lot of miners, they would live in these makeshift camps, usually living in tents. And so guards were firing into the camp along with the National Guard. They killed several men, women, and children. Came into the camp, destroyed the camp, burned it down. Here's a picture of what the camp looked like afterwards, right? So this just totally destroyed. All their property was destroyed there, the mine workers. So ultimately, the mine workers had to accept that their union would not be recognized by the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company. All right, so that was a loss, but it's an example of workers coming together and organizing to fight for the rights. An example of a successful workers' strike happened in the Clifton-Morenci strike in Arizona. And so here you have copper mine workers who were striking to get equal pay as Anglo-American workers, right? So Mexican Americans are striking to get equal pay. They're trying to break that Mexican wage scale so that they can receive equal pay for their work, the same pay that Anglo-Americans are making. Now, in the Clifton-Morenci strike, this will be a success for Mexican-American miners. Part of the reason for the success is because there in Arizona, the governor will call on the National Guard not to stop the strike, but to stop strike breakers, workers, from being imported in to the area to break the strike. So you'll actually see support coming from the governor there in Arizona, and eventually you'll see Mexican-American workers getting promised equal pay after the Clifton-Morenci strike. But a couple of years later, another strike in the same area in Arizona, around Bisbee, Arizona, is not going to go so well for Mexican-American miners. So the Bisbee strike is going to occur during World War I, and this is a time when mines need to really pick up production because what they're mining, like copper, can be used in the war effort, right? So they need to increase production. So now the fact that mine workers are striking for higher pay during this time is a problem for the United States in general, right? And so you're going to see this strike get broken eventually, and mine workers will actually be deported, not to Mexico, but to New Mexico. So from Bisbee, Arizona, miners are going to be loaded onto railroad cars that are for cattle. They're not going to be given any food and not much water, and they're going to be transported into New Mexico, into a desert area. And they're just going to be left there and told not to come back to Bisbee. And that's how that strike gets broken in Bisbee. And this is happening all during World War I. okay, which is leading to heightened tensions around the strike. And so that's one way that that strike was broken, right? Just through deportation to another state. A little after this time, still in 1917, a reaction to what's going on with the war, you're going to see a lot of legal attacks coming on to the leadership of the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, who were supporting, Mexican-American workers during this time. And so leaders of the IWW will be rounded up and charged with obstructing the war effort because they are helping strikes and supporting strikes during this time when production needs to actually be increased because of the war. And so a lot of these leaders of the IWW will be arrested, and they're going to have to deal with court trials, and ultimately this is going to weaken the power of the IWW in workers' affairs. So during this time, Mexican Americans were getting heavily involved in these movements. They were joining unions, they were participating in strikes, and all of this is part of the anarcho-syndicalism ideology. What is that? Anarcho-syndicalism basically supports the rights of workers to participate in direct action against their employers. So that includes joining trade unions. That includes going on strike in order to fight for your rights, whether it's better pay or working conditions or living conditions. This is all supported under the ideology of anarcho-syndicalism. And Mexican Americans were becoming more and more interested in this ideology and participating in it, okay? Now, this was all a viewpoint that was against the idea of a capitalist state, right? There was a belief that the capitalist state worked against workers and was oppressing them, right? Not giving them enough power over their labor or wages, etc. And so that's why they supported the forming of unions and strikes to fight against the capitalist system and fight for workers' rights, and eventually to overthrow the wage slavery system that existed in capitalist countries, right? That was all part of the anarcho-syndicalism ideology, and Mexican Americans were getting involved in this. Now, because more Mexican American workers were getting involved in these activities, you would eventually see the president at the time during World War I, Woodrow Wilson, supporting restrictions on immigration from Mexico. But eventually, even during this time, the government would get a lot of pressure from different industries such as the agricultural industry, the mining industry, the railroad industry, to allow for more Mexican migrant workers to make it into the United States. They wanted to get rid of the taxes on visas and other requirements for migrant workers to come into the U.S. to work. And so you have business leaders fighting for Mexican immigration at this time. Why? Obviously because they want a cheap labor force. Okay, so they want migrants coming from Mexico, and these business leaders would pressure the U.S. government to allow this to happen, and yeah, eventually it would. Okay, so you will see a large influx of Mexican migrants around this time of the war because these industries need the support, because you have to really up your production during the war, right? And you can make a lot of money on it as well. Okay.